Hello folks, welcome back to the channel. Thank you very much for joining me once again. You are always most welcome. Well, today another quick Mozzie update, and I think that a fair amount has happened since the last video where I was showing you basically the fine detailing painting that I was doing with the engines. So I've now actually got them all mounted up in their bearers sort of subframe that they sit in. So I thought I'd just talk you through it and one or two of the issues and pitfalls I encountered. I say issues, some of it's self-inflicted, some of it not. Some of it is traps. If you have this kit, you should definitely listen up, because there are one or two little traps waiting for you if you're not very careful. And I was quite lucky because I posted some of my photographs about a week ago on the Flory forum, and one of the guys, I think it was Neil Taylor, is it? Forgive me if I got his name wrong. Neil, I know it's Neil. And he said, if I remember correctly, this is the stage where you've got to be very careful to not mix up your left and your right. And I read this and I said, all right, thanks for the tip, thanks for the warning. And he was absolutely right, because what happens is you have to build two Merlin engines, and I have to say, this is where the build has got a little bit boring, which it inevitably would do when there's a duplication of anything. A lot of people, of course, would maybe not bother painting and detailing up, because I'm not really probably going to show both the engines at the same time. I may do though, I may do. I should just mention as well something very interesting, a very unusual problem that's occurred, a quality issue with Tamiya, a genuine quality problem. Really? May God forgive me for saying this. Where is it? Here it is. We have got a major quality fail here. Something very strange, which I haven't seen before. Similar product to the Spitfire, but we never had it on the Spitfire. Let me see if I can show you this. Something most bizarre, actually. What it is, we have these neodymium magnets, which are very powerful little magnets. I'm going to be careful with this, because I don't get it in my watch. Yeah, we don't want that near the Swiss watch. Let's just move to the other hand. So we have these neodymium magnets. Here they are. These are the bigger ones. That I think these are 4mm. Or is it 5mm? Sorry. There's a whole load of them there stuck together, as you can see, and they're very effective and they're brilliant, quite frankly, very high quality, and they do the job beautifully. Tamiya cleverly engineer recesses for them to be glued into, and it all works generally very well. And this is when you've got your little panels for your basically it magnetises to the photo etch that goes on the inside of the counting panels. However, why am I mentioning this? Well, because we seem to have had a really strange thing occur here, and it's on this one. This is the smaller ones, which are about 3.5mm. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this too well. I don't want to get them out, because I'll have a disaster if I do, I'll lose them. But can you see, if I'm going very closely here, we have had, one of them has exploded into a load of iron filings, basically, like magnetic filings. And there's no physical reason I can see for this. I don't remember it being like that when I first got the kit back in 2015. So over time, so it must have had a defect within the actual... Very hard to see, isn't it? Basically, you've got all this, what looks like powder is actually the internals within that bag, like powdery internals, where the magnet has literally shattered and showered dust, and it's magnetised to the other other three magnets that are in there. So it's very strange, I've got to say. Have I used one of those? No, I've used one of the bigger ones. Yeah, I used one of the bigger ones. Now, we've never had anything like that happen before, not in a Tamiya kit. It's like a manufacturing defect in the actual magnets themselves. Very strange. I say, if I showed it you properly, there's a risk I'm going to end up losing them, so I'm not going to do that. But to take it as read, just one of them has failed and literally sort of exploded almost within the bag. That was peculiar. So that's a slight problem. That means I couldn't display them all open anyway. So we've got we're a magnet down, basically. So I'll have to... I mean, I could buy some more. I actually thought I bought some more for the Spitfire. I'm sure I bought some in the not too distant past. About 5 years ago. Can't find them. I also can't find my vinyl tubing bag, which has got some spare nuts and screws and tubing from my Formula 1 cars, and I had this for years, and I always said, oh, these are items I must keep because they'll be very valuable. Can I find them? Can I? Yeah, 'cause nowhere that I would expect them to be at all. Even not in places that I wouldn't expect them to be. I'm sure they'll show up though, because I'm sure I haven't thrown those away. They're just the sort of items you wouldn't chuck away. I think it was 1, 2 and 3mm tubing from Tamiya. Something valuable, you know. Anyway, let's talk about some of the pitfalls then. So, first of all, something that you may notice I've got my sprue goo here. I want to talk about sprue goo as well. Now, sprue goo, I think people sometimes, it's probably the wrong name, isn't it? I mean, I don't know who invented the name sprue goo, but it's quite a good one, isn't it? But I said it wasn't me, obviously. But we have got a bit of a misunderstanding, I think, in the modelling world about sprue goo. If you want the most effective sprue goo, you don't want to use sprue. Because what happens is, it's basically what's in this bottle. It's, as you probably guess, it's a mixture of Tamiya Extra Thin. It's roughly a 50-50 mix between Tamiya Extra Thin and actually styrene sheet plastic card. Okay, which is why it's white. Okay, so it's polystyrene sheet, and it's very, very effective as a filler of small recesses, and I do mean small ones. We're not trying to replace filler with this, but there are times, and I'll explain in a second, give you an example, times when filler isn't possible to use, and you can't get it into places, and it's impossible to apply it. And with this, you can get into tiny little holes, tiny little recesses, perhaps where there are little gaps. This will go in, and it doesn't shrink because it's not sprue. Sprue would shrink. But the plastic card doesn't shrink in the same way, and it tends to work far more effectively. I mean, it stinks just like, you know, Extra Thin, obviously. So that's what it is. It's basically a compound of Extra Thin melted. You could call it super thick. It's no longer Extra Thin, but it works so beautifully, and it keeps for quite a long time as well. I think that's about 3 or 4 years old. So get yourself some plastic card. Get yourself some. Probably easy if you get some very thin, actually, because it melts quicker. Get yourself some of the Extra Thin plastic card, and if you've got half an Extra Thin bottle left, just mix it all up together, and you've got yourself the ultimate filler, really, but only for small areas. It's no good for big holes, you know, or big panel gaps or whatever, or big seam lines. Really is best somewhere where it's very tight and you can't really get anything else in there, really. So, I wanted to mention that because we actually had a scenario with these Merlin engines where I needed to use this, actually, which surprised me. And then I remembered, I do remember, I think I had the same issue. Nothing's changed on the design of these, the tooling, you know, the moulding for the Merlin that was on the Spitfire, and the Mustang for that matter. And I remembered this, so this is now actually my 3rd and 4th Merlins from Tamiya that I built. And what it is, I'll zoom you in and sort of explain it better. I'll show you the after, because this is, I should have taken a photo. Have I got a photo? I'm just going to check, actually. There might just be I took a photo, I'm not sure if I did or not. Let me have a quick look. Did I have a photo of that engine with the gap in it? Because there was a photo. I don't think it came out very well. Is it in this one? Not really. Yes, it is actually. I have actually got it. I can show you. Right, so here's the Merlin. Zoom in. Here's the Merlin before it's painted, obviously. Now look very carefully. They have these drive shafts that come out. This is obviously from the cylinder head, at the back of the cylinder head, where the camshafts are. And you can see there's a gap there, just where my finger is. There's actually a gap. Now this is nothing to do with the way I've built it. This is just tolerances in the kit. And it's particularly bad it's always bad on this right side. It's something that their tolerances not quite hitting the money somehow. Here there's a tiny gap, but here there's quite a big gap. It's good, well over 1 millimetre, I'd say, which is quite big. So this is exactly where filler's not really going to help you, and you do need the sprue goo. And this is where it comes in. I'll show you the after of having fixed this with sprue goo, so you can see the value of it. I'm glad I had that photo. I knew I had a photo somewhere. So I'll show you the sort of after. We'll get into the details of all this in a minute. Which one is that? That's the left. It doesn't really matter which is which. It's both the same actually. But let's see if I can get in as close as I can on the zoom. See if you'll see the gap is now basically gone. Oops. Keep going. Okay, if I come in a bit closer, can you just about see if I get my cocktail stick? We are talking about here, just beyond where my cocktail stick is there. Sorry, there we go. So there's no gap anymore, it's been filled in basically. So this is the beauty of it, you can use it for very awkward spots like that. And it's a fantastic way of produce your own product. Doesn't cost you any real money apart from a bit of plastic card. Anyway, moving on. So here's what the Merlin looks like, sort of effectively pretty much finished really. It's got some mild weathering now. It's in its cradles, its engine bearers. You've got the I think it's the CO2 cartridge. CO2 is it? I think it's CO2. And then you've got all the areas, and I'm going to use my cocktail stick again to just describe some of the pitfalls of building this. So I'll tell you something that was really, really difficult. One of the trickiest parts of this build, of the engine setup, was actually connecting up this lubrication pipe here. Whoops, this one, the one that's copper coloured. Getting that glued into there was an absolute nightmare because it comes right at the end. You sit the engine in and then you've got this springy lubrication pipe here, and you've got to get it to hold it in there and get the glue to set, and it doesn't want to, it naturally wants to spring out. That was absolutely nightmarish, and of course you've got to do this 4 times, turn it around. Same on the other side, same issue. A real nightmare, to be quite honest. So what I did is I just got a little bit of just a little piece of the old blue tack, obviously a lot smaller than that, about a quarter of what I've got in my fingers. And I just sort of forced it underneath, made it into a bit of a flat shape, popped it in there where my finger currently is there on the left, just to sort of fill in the gap and hold it in place. And it still gave trouble, and it was more troublesome on this side, the left side, on both engines. So in the end I super glued it, but I still had to hold it in with the super glue, you know. But you can see we're progressing nicely. So we've got the firewall in there, all the bearers are in, obviously it's now sitting in its bearers, all glued in and ready to go. Yeah, I'm fairly happy with that, I've got to be honest. So it took a lot of time though. You've got to take your time if you're going to do work like this. Now here's the thing, talking about pitfalls, let's just go back to what I was going to start to say. So how would we go about this then? And this is a word of warning for you, a very strong word of warning. Thanks to our friend Neil over at the Flory Forum, who said just make sure you don't mix your left and your right up. And you're thinking, well, they're both the same, aren't they? Well, actually they're not. I'm going to show you how they are not the same in 2 or 3 ways. You've got 2 engines, and then when you actually are mounting them, that's when the differences start to become apparent. So if I just zoom you back and have a look at the instructions, I shall show you what I mean. It's very easy to get blasé when you've got 2 and you've done the first one. So, sorry, I should explain. I actually built, taking his advice well on board, because there's nothing better than good advice from a modeller who's been there before you. So I took his advice well on board. I thought, right, I'm not going to do what I was going to do, which is build them like mass production and just duplicate everything. Left here, right there. I'm not going to do that, and I literally didn't. I literally built one engine, finished it, mounted it, and then I built the second engine up. I don't mean the build of the engines themselves, but the build into the cradles. I did not make a sort of Henry Ford mass production line, and I'm glad I didn't, because if you do that you're going to fall into a couple of terrible traps, nasty Vietnam style traps with spikes at the bottom that are going to get you. So let me show you what I mean. There's 3 areas where you can really screw up, and I actually fell into one of them, not the other 2, thankfully. So where my thumb is now, this is starting to build the engine mount, the engine bearers. And one of the things that's very unusual about this is you are supposed to, you'll have already noted when you looked at the images of the engine a second ago, that I'd left the sprue in place. And somebody said, painting on the sprue, I think it was Lee, wasn't it? Lee said, shame on you, you know. Get behind me. You paint on the sprue. Disgusting. But you're actually supposed to leave them. It says here, you know, do not cut it off at this stage until step 33, when you're actually doing the final plumbing in. And the reason is it makes it stronger and it makes it easier to handle it as well. So what I did is I followed the instructions, obviously, and then I sprayed this. I sprayed the silver first, airframe silver. I'm using Alclad, by the way, which is giving a brilliant result. Very happy with it. That's the only one that I thought was I tried the extreme metals, but I didn't quite like the finish of it, and I wasn't getting such a perfect result as I was expecting, which is unusual. In fact, it was so poor. I should just mention this because I don't want to sound like I'm knocking extreme metals. I'm a big fan of that product, actually. AK, Extreme Metals. I actually wonder if I actually had a faulty bottle, a faulty batch, because it was mottling and it was behaving really weirdly, and I thought it was almost like it had release agent on the actual parts. Now here's something else I should talk about, which will shock some of you and disgust you in equal measure, I expect. So here's the thing. Most of those kits of mine that you've seen in my sort of greatest hits album, I am unusual in one other way when I make my models, because certainly with the Tamiya ones and quite a few of the Airfix, not all by any stretch of the imagination, but all the Tamiya apart from the Spitfire, I think, I never prime the product. I also never wash. Now, when I say never, I'm talking about Tamiya, so please understand. I'm not giving any advice here. I'm just telling you what I do. I've never needed to wash Tamiya sprues because I've never had a problem with paint sticking to them at all, actually. Now, when I say I had a problem with this one, I actually think it was actually a rogue, because my other AK metals I've used already in the build so far have been fine. And I swapped to Alclad, and instantly the problem just gone. So it wasn't contamination, it was something else, because I took it, you know, I had obviously got several sprues that are the same, and there's never been, so you say, well, that's crazy, why don't you do that? Because I know a lot of people swear by washing the sprues, and I do not disagree with that, actually. I think in a lot of kits, I mean, certainly Reval, my God, you definitely need to wash the sprues. You need to get some, you know, washing up liquid. Give them a good old wash, because they come absolutely plastered in release agent sometimes. We've had one or two of the Airfix recently have been like that from India, very bad as well. And there's some of the Far Eastern manufacturers as well. I'm trying to think, one of the Chinese ones, was it Meng? They sometimes come with a bit of release agent on them. So it is good practice. I'm being quite lazy here, if I'm honest. But I've just had such good results without bothering to either... This is terrible, really. So I neither wash them nor prime. Now, I did prime the Spitfire because I was determined I wanted to get a really good result on that. So that was primed, because I was going to do a bit of pre-shading. So I definitely primed that one. I also primed the Sea Harrier because I was very worried about the kinetic plastic anyway. So I'm not trying to generalise here, but a lot of kits don't need that faffing around on them. They just don't. Especially like armour kits, where it's a less sensitive finish, do you know what I mean? It's going to get weathered to hell anyway. I think people get carried away with these things. But there are times when, you know, to prove the point that this is not a panacea and this is not something you should just copy and, oh, well, if he doesn't do it, I'm not going to do it. Now, I wouldn't take that as the advice here at all. Because there's been occasions in the past where I have come unstuck. I'm trying to think what the kit was, where the paint just started rubbing off completely on one of them. Was it one of the cars? I can't think. Was it the Fujimi? It might be the Fujimi, and the paint started rubbing off, and then I primed it and it was fine. So I am just saying that Tamiya, I'm sure that Tamiya must have a process. They either have the most perfect, clean and very controlled environment but they still must get it out. They must use release agent. They must use it. I've never seen a Tamiya kit with blodges of release agent on it at all, or any traces of smell, or, you know, that greasiness you get. So I wonder if they aren't actually, they're so advanced in their production process that they're not washed in the factory. I do wonder, because you know that they're the kings of precision in terms of things like, well, we know we don't get any bad kits. You know, we've talked about Airfix in the past and Revell, but you don't get bad kits coming out of Tamiya with quality defects. I'm talking, you know, literally bits missing, parts off the sprue, you know, warping and all this kind of thing, and short shots and sink mark. You don't get that. I hardly ever get anything like that with Tamiya. And one of the reasons is that they have a system that we know that they weigh the kit very accurately. I think it's to within 1/4 of a gram or something. And if there's any deviation in a kit, it's immediately rejected on the end of the production line when it's being checked at the end, when it's after they put them in the boxes. So I don't think it's like a cottage industry. You know, it's very, very advanced, I think, Tamiya. And it shows, and I say, I've never felt the need to prime, which is, I think I'm going to on this one though. I just want to say up front, I'm not doing so far. None of this has been primed, nothing. But I think when I do the actual, the airframe, the aeroplane itself, the wings and the fuselage, etc., that's going to get a primer on it. I think that it works so well for me with the AK. I primed it with Mr. Hobby. Was it 1500 primer? I think it was. I think I used the rattle can, and it worked beautifully. Didn't need much of it, you know, just the light coat, and it was fine. And it worked really well with the AK paints. So I'm going to use that learning for me. Roll it out on when I do the actual paint job. However, with the exception of the Spitfire, I don't think any other kit, the Spitfire and the Sea Harrier, I don't think any other kits have been primed ever. Oh, my reputation is in tatters. Anyway, the fact is, if you've got any doubt in your mind, prime. Yeah, if you've got doubts. But if you haven't got doubts, and I didn't have any doubts any of those, you know. Same with the Formula 1 cars and things, you know, I've never needed to prime those. I've got beautiful results, you know. And I've used rattle can on them, and I've used airbrush, and I've used clear coats and lacquers and all sorts. And I've never had an issue with paint adhesion, because Tamiyas in particular, not just them, I get the feeling, I'm not sure about Qatari, they're pretty good as well, I think, you know, the likes of Qatari and Zukimura. But as I say, don't take that as advice, because I don't want to be blamed for somebody's model getting wrecked. But I've been very lazy, and I've been lazy on this so far, and it's worked fine. Absolutely no problem at all. So don't over-engineer, don't make life, you know, because if you're doing this the way, I'm cutting corners, you could argue there, but I don't cut corners in other respects. I go the extra mile to the point of the ridiculous sometimes. And I'll show you some of that in a second. Just sort of sharing my experience. Anyway, going back to the point, you could duplicate, you've got two Millen engines here, you want them to be identical. So you could easily duplicate them, but be careful because there are differences, as I started to say before I interrupted myself. So what you've got here, let me show you some of the things. So I mentioned you've got that sprue that has to be left on, which they showed almost greyed out, just underneath where my thumb is there. And that just helps you have something to hold on to while you're manipulating it, painting it, etc. So I pre-painted everything. I did a bit of painting on the sprue. Oh, shocking! What a POS modeler, eh? And then I did this, the airframe metal finish was with Alclad. And then I got my cockpit interior for the engine bearers, etc, etc. Now down here is where it starts to get interesting, because there's a couple of things here that could very easily catch you out. The first thing that might catch you out is you just go hacking off that, just willy-nilly, without even thinking about it. Oh, right, okay, I need to set that up the spring. It's so easy to chop that off without realising it's supposed to be there. So guess what I did? No, I paid attention. I did not chop it off. But then when I did the second one, I was in such a hurry thinking, like what did I say in the other video? I'm a man! I don't need all this instruction. I've already built one. I've just done it. How hard can it be? Hack, hack, hack. Oh my God, stop, stop! Oh, you've done it again, you bloody fool! Sure enough, I'd hacked one off completely, and the other one I just cut one side. So I carefully, with a bit of extra thing, just re-adhered it back in, just to... I mean, you're going to chop them off in the next stage I'm about to do now anyway, but it just shows you, it's so easy to start thinking, I've got this, leave it with me, no problem, let's go. Then you go into autopilot in your head, And I've been listening to a very good audiobook. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And you listen to the audiobook and you go, ah, oh, what have I done? You know, anyway. Then there's other things where you can really easily get caught out, where there are differences in these two engines. They're not both the same. So look down here. Right at the end of the support framework here, of the engine bearer, where it goes into the nacelle at the back, behind the firewall is here. You've got these two pieces. These are like where it reaches into the main frame of the aircraft, and the spars, etc., where the nacelle fits in. Those are different on each side, and this is another area where I actually made the mistake and instantly realised before it had bonded the adhesive and quickly pulled it off and corrected it just in the nick of time. You've got that, which is different on either side, because if you look very, very closely, one's longer and one's shorter. So this is the right engine, the starboard engine. The longer one is on the starboard side, but over on the other one, the longer one is on the port side. See it there? Yes, part J3. That's now on the port side. So the longer one is always on the outside, the outboard. Then we've got a second thing that we shall catch you out, and that is the generator, power generator. And by the way, this is on the aircraft. This is actually driven by that shaft where I had to put the sprue going at the top of, and it was at the top of the cylinder head there. So you've got this generator, which is quite typical. But then on this side, it's a much shorter generator. It's not the same. Can you see the difference? Part P8 and P4, they're not the same. Different. And then finally, you've got the air compressor. This little tiny, like a little, very small motor, like a little miniature engine, which drives off, again, off the back of the camshaft. On this one, no, you actually cut off the spigot that it connects to remove it. Oh, this is on the right side, starboard side, but on the port side, it has this little generator which goes on it. So it's very easy. I mean, the problem is with these sprues, and this is where you can really get yourself deep in trouble. Without realising, there's so much duplication on the two sprues that you've got enough parts to do it both ways. You know, there's not just one part, it's just a sprue that's completely duplicated. So you can easily duplicate it wrong with too many parts or with too few. So it'd be very easy to just, oh, right, well, we cut that off. Oh no, I've got to put this extra part on. Or you may have stuck it on. It's a good job that in that case, on the air compressor, they didn't say that first, otherwise you might have gone into autopilot and stuck that on when you didn't need to stick it on. See what I'm saying? There's quite a few areas, at least 3 or 4 areas there where you can get into a right trap. So don't. It's a good job I got that advice from Neil, and it's a good job that I listened to him, and it's a good job that I'm glad that I actually built them up separately. Didn't try to do it all at once in a multiple process, because that's when you're going to get yourself into real trouble, I think. You only have to have the minorest of distraction, a text, a phone call, somebody comes to the door, you know, your train of thought is disturbed. Before you know it, you've glued it all up wrong, you've got completely inaccurate engines in there. And breathe. The thing is, I've got to say, it was quite, doing the second engine was a bit uphill. It was easier than the first because you've 90% of it is the same. So it's not as difficult to know what to do. But I did make another error as well. I've got my gloves on because I'm handling them. I made one mistake. There was one moment when I'd had lunch or something. I'd come back from lunch and I thought, I'm just going to glue together the two bits of the bearer. It goes together like a frame, like a V. I'd be fine. I won't bother with the gloves for this. A little bit of an extra thing. Before you know it, it just ran onto my finger and I got my thumb, in fact, this thumb. And I smeared it and it took the paint off, and it just shows you. And I thought, well, that wouldn't have been as bad if I'd been wearing the gloves. And it put a thumbprint in it as well, which made a right mess. So that had to be repainted. It's funny, all the times I'm wearing the gloves, and this one moment, which is probably the one moment I needed to wear them. Well, one of those critical times, anyway. And I bodged it, you know. Anyway, all fixed now, all fixed now. So we have 2 of them, obviously. We've got 2 that are absolutely identical, apart from the thing that I've just explained. In all other respects, they are pretty much identical. They've got the same weathering, pretty much. Not absolute like for like. There's a little bit of natural variety in there. But you'll see that I've done a little bit of. See underneath here. You probably tell now that we've got a little bit more weathered looking, a little bit more natural looking. Still kept it a bit bling with my Rolls Royce plates, but that's part of the attraction. You want to see that. But it's come together very, very nicely, and I think that I am pretty pleased with that. And it wasn't easy, so particularly these copper pipes, getting them to go in at the end, that was really difficult. In fact, my wife came in to bring me a cup of tea when I was in the middle of doing this, and I sort of, well, I was a bit snappy really. She walked into my lab at the wrong moment. I was like, "Get out! It says don't disturb on the door." There's a sign that says "Do not disturb." Do not disturb. Cranky modeler. Building in progress. Well, that's what it says now. Get out. So obviously I had to go and make my own lunch after that. Now that's that one. Here's the left side. You'll see that was the right side, the first one obviously. Here's the left side. You can see that I've again we've got the let's get the focus right. We've got the weathering underneath, and it's ready now to go and start being. The next thing is the coolant and oil. It has a coolant tank at the front here, of course, and it has an oil lubrication tank at the back, a big one. And they've got to go in. But you see, there's a lot of detail painting still on things like these pipes. You see that? So there's been a lot of additional fine tuning, and I have to say, things like panel accent lines have been used here as well, just to liven it up a bit where the joins are, where there's a weld or a seam, to try and make it just look that little bit more lifelike. But it's very, very time consuming. Now, a lot of the time, because I'm such a perfectionist, a lot of my time has been spent literally going back and forth. So I've just shown you those copper pipes. So there's a copper pipe, and then there's obviously there's a bit of aluminium at the union, and you just don't completely get it perfect, do you, with your brush, and you just slightly overlap, and you've got a little bit too much copper on the union, and then you go back and then you do the aluminium again, and this time just a fraction in one spot underneath, a fraction too much aluminium when it's gone over the actual copper bit of the pipe, and you're chasing it all the time to try and get it just right. I'm sure you'll agree that that's pretty much perfect now, but that was not first time. It wasn't right first time, trust me. I must have gone over them 5 or 6 times to get them right. Easy. But yeah, that's where we're at. So I'm fairly pleased with the way it's gone. So we're now on to the exhaust will be the next thing. So I mentioned previously we've got that slight earlier error I made where I cropped off the stubs that will join the exhaust into the engine. And I didn't drill the end. Sorry, I cropped them off because I failed to drill the holes in the engine, but it doesn't matter. There is another male stud actually in that cylinder head. It's quite hard to spot it, but there are 2 of them in fact. Little tiny studs that just come in. So I've got to be a little bit careful with how I do that, and I've got to have to be very patient in the way that I join it all together. But there we go. So there's the 2 Merlins. A tale of 2 Merlins. There you go. So the next time you see them, they will have their lubricant tanks and their coolant tanks attached front and rear. I'll show you the next step, in fact, in the instructions so you can see where we're at. We're at stage 32. Now it's 32 out of, what is it, 105, is it? As I say, some of those stages are fairly straightforward actually. They're not as intricate with some of the fine painting that we've had to go through here. I feel we're about halfway through the build now, in truth, in terms of work and hours. So it's definitely got my mojo up, and 1 or 2 of you have been commenting saying, "Oh, I've got that kit in the stash." So here's the exhaust pipes. Now here's an interesting point to make. Isn't this interesting? So it's a V12 engine, and yet we only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 exhaust stubs only. And that, of course, is because the rear one is a double one, and they did that because they were quite worried at de Havilland that the very last exhaust stub would have been too close to the wing, and they were frightened it was going to set fire to the wing, so they wanted to move it forward. So they made 2 into 1. I've got a reference photograph as well. See if I can show you. I think I may have it. where you can see that because of that, it gets a lot hotter, that final stub. Let me see if I can find this photo, because I think you'll enjoy it. So yeah, you have a lot of... is it that one? It's that one. Here we go, I found it. I'm doing well with the photographs today. First time, there we go. Now look very carefully. This has actually got the Merlin is running. It's actually running. But look, if you look at the final... You see how it's glowing? Here, see it's glowing orange. And you can see more flame because it's got double flame coming out of that one. So they're all running, but this one is glowing orange at the back. So the back one is a double one. So you only have 10 exhaust stubs on this variant. The next thing I've got to decide is the colour of them, and this is a bit, you can see all the copper pipes, can't you now? That's going to be a slight challenge for me because I've seen many photographs, colour photographs, and there's a lot of variance in the colour. They tend to be this sort of slightly bronzy looking silver metallic, sort of bronzy look to it, and they recommend that you mix metallic grey with just a splash of red, which I've done before, and I'm not quite convinced it comes across as a bit dark. I think that's too dark. It's not the end of the world either way, you know, but I think it needs to be slightly lighter than that. And of course the other thing is it depends on the way these exhausts look, can depend on how old the aircraft is and how the engines were run, rich or lean and things like that. All has an impact. See if we've got a picture. Here we go. Now in this rebuilt one, just proving my point to a degree, but more so perhaps, look at the exhausts here. They look quite silver, don't they? You see that? So it's a real dilemma, isn't it? Knowing how to go on colour. Actually, it looks less silver on the camera than it does to the human naked eye here. But anyway, it looks sort of darker. It's a little bit more, perhaps a coppery. You can see that slight coppery element to it. But as I say, I've seen. I did see somebody built this model, and I can't think who it was. Not one of the household names. I think he's a well-known model, but not maybe on YouTube. I can't think who it was now. Somebody had done a really nice one, and he'd got the exhaust staining. It looked absolutely perfect. And I remember thinking, if I could get even close to that, I'd be happy, you know. So this is an area where I'm going to have to take my time. I'm going to have to take my time with my colour mixes and be absolutely happy in my own mind. It shouldn't be red, but it shouldn't be silver. Do you know what I mean? It should have this sort of coppery hue to it, this slightly burned. A bit like the Spitfire I flew on. Oh, like the one behind my head. Did I ever tell you that I once flew in a Spitfire? Yeah, I did. Okay. Right. Anyway, but that was the same. You know, they have this slightly. There's a lot of lead staining from the fuel. They have a slight blowback effect, slight burned on the tips. Oh, and speaking of the tips, I'll show you those actually. Something else to interest you. I can find them. Here we go. Let's see, P. Yes, sprue P. So the exhaust tips that come in the kit, a lot of people will go for aftermarket for these items. But I just warn you again, I did that with I tried to, with the Spitfire. And it sort of blew up in my face because they were a horrible fit. I can't think whose they were now. Were they Barracuda? Or Air Race? I forget that. I don't know if slagging anybody off. I can't remember which one it was. But one of them anyway. One of the popular ones. And they weren't a great fit. They looked beautiful, but they were a terrible fit, and I couldn't make them work without it looking wrong, you know. And I couldn't get them to glue in the right alignment. So in the end I went with the kit ones. And this is where I had the problem where, and you'll notice if I show you here what I'm talking about, once again, Tamiya have not chose the best place to put their sprue gate contact point on the exhaust stub, but it's better than the Spitfire, because on the Spitfire, as did Airfix later on the Mark 9 that they did as well, both of those manufacturers put the attachment point right in the centre where the seam is that's on the real exhaust. They have on the fishtail exhaust, they have a seam. Now you can see here they've actually done it slightly better. It could have been better still. But at least this time it's on the back, if you look, on the back of the exhaust stub, not right in the face where it's going to be seen. So less likely to be a problem and, you know, a briefer, simpler clean-up. When I had to, with my tail between my legs, when I had to go back and sorry, I was going to show you the actual the opening. I I'm jumping around here. So I was going to talk about the opening of these because I don't think they're too bad, you know. I know they're not deep. The recess isn't deep. Where are we? Get this right. I'm showing you the right part. Yes, these two where my fingers are. Ignore the other two. But the two where my fingers are, the first and third, that's the actual aperture you're looking at of the exhaust. And it's not deep, but they're very, very thin on the Mosquito. They're quite a narrow aperture on the exhaust on these later Merlins. And therefore, I'm not sure the aftermarket's going to add an awful lot anyway, frankly. I'm going to go with these. No question at all. I think they will look at, you know, with a little bit of weathering, they'll look absolutely great, you know. But I was saying, I had to get back my tail between my legs and had to use the ones that were from the Tamiya kit, even though it had this horrible problem. They did fit properly, really well, of course. But I then had to sort of scribe out. I had to remove the waste from where the sprue contacted the exhaust, scrape it away, and then kind of rescribe in the seam, the natural seam that's on the real exhaust. Not great, not great. Anyway, as I say, if they'd have been like blank, flat, then I couldn't tolerate that. I'd have to dump them. But they're all right, those. They are adequate. And I say you can lift that with a little bit of weathering. If you just highlight them a little bit with a bit of dry brushing on the end, so they'll be dark in the recess. A little bit of highlighting around the lip, it'll look quite nice, I think. That's the plan anyway. You might have noticed I've been painting on the sprue, a POS modeler. Again, look. God, I should get my t-shirts out again, shouldn't I? Some of you promised to buy my t-shirts. At least 2 of you, and you haven't bought them yet. You know who you are. Yes, I'm not naming names, but I want you to go away and think about what you've done. Anyway, I've been a POS modeler painting on the sprue there. So this is the coolant tank at the front of the engine, the collar. And it will be in basically an aluminium colour. And then you've got the airframe cockpit green as the bit in the middle. You can also see here the other alternate exhaust, by the way, for the Southeast Asia version of the kit, the export version. Can you see how they were, because for the same reasons I've just talked about, look how they modified this exit. Because here, because they're in a very hot climate, even more fear about the heat from the exhaust igniting the wings. So they've moved them, they've put them into this one, almost like a manifold, yeah, exhaust manifold with a bigger exit, bigger aperture. You can see it there to turn it round. A bigger aperture, because they are wanting to move that flame forward away from the leading edge of the wing, as far forward as they possibly can. Now I'm not going to use those parts because I'm doing the standard version, the A version, the Amion Raid. But if you do want to do the Southeast Asia Australian edition, then that became a big issue for them, and you can see how they modified the aircraft because it's in a hot country. The wood will be hot. A hint of a flame close to that wood would set it off, so they want to change the design to move the exhaust flames away. I mean, it couldn't have helped the efficiency of the engine very much, I don't think, could it really? But there we have it. Yeah, it's quite interesting. And I've got to say, I'm sure it goes without saying really, I am very much enjoying building this model. It may be the most enjoyable model I've ever built. Certainly up there with the Spitfire and the Mustang. Actually, I mean they're all in the same club, aren't they? But I think because it's just got this 633 Squadron sort of vibe about it. And I mentioned I was listening to a very good podcast. It's actually an audio book. Let me show you what I am listening to because I think you'll enjoy hearing about this. Some of you will probably know about it already because it was in the press last week. So this is a book by a real hero, Flight Lieutenant Colin Bell, who was on the BBC News and he's been on ITV and all the major news channels. He's just got this book out called Bloody Dangerous. And he was a Mosquito pilot from 1943 onwards, late 43, early 44. And he did training in America, his pilot training in America, became an instructor, won the Distinguished Flying Cross. And this is a riveting read. Now, one of the things I must mention, you may have seen this chap, you may have seen him on the news. Although I thought the people at the BBC who interviewed him on the breakfast programme, they were not fit to sit in the same room as he was, quite frankly. But he was also interviewed by James Holland. James Holland gave him a bit of an endorsement there, you'll notice. James Holland and Al Murray interviewed him. What's striking about this man, though, he's 105. And he comes across like he's about 75, maybe 80. He comes across, you just can't believe he's 105. He's like, no, he can't be, because he's too... I was going to say intelligent, that's the wrong word, but he's far too cognitive, and he's got such good speech, and he can answer questions. He's very clear in his speech, and his memories are still clear. It belies his age. He's at least 25 years younger than his age tells you he is. Do you know what I mean? One of these people who's forever young, really. A remarkable man. Well, I've got to tell you that having listened to this, it's full of... I strongly recommend this read to you. I'm listening to it on the audio because I'm modelling, and it's helping because he's talking about the Mosquito and the characteristics. It's perfect timing that this came out for me. But he's very eloquent, this guy, and he's very amusing as well. He was quite a boy, a real ladies' man, bit of a joke, a bit naughty, caused a lot of mischief and got into trouble with some of the military police and all sorts of hijinks he got up to. A real you say, you know, a life well lived he's had. There's no question about that. And he was very lucky as well. He's had some real near scrapes with his flying career when he was in the Mosquito. I recommend that to you. I think that's the best thing I've listened to, sort of stroke read, since the Sharkey Ward book, Sea Harrier Over the Falklands. It's like that. It's not quite as strategic. It's more, it comes across like more like an ordinary kind of Joe Public goes to war, if you know what I mean. A bit like Dave Morgan was in the Falklands in a way. But he's very amusing, and he talks about his amorous adventures, but not in the way that Dave Morgan did. Because I was thinking that, listening, I'm thinking, this is what Dave Morgan's book should have been like. The style of it, I mean. Not getting too heavy and too melodramatic and too flowery and taking itself too seriously. He's a real pleasant person to spend time with. He's one of those people that you feel he's good fun. He's got a great sense of humour, and he also he puts you right in the seat of the a seat of the pants flight of the Mosquito, and he makes it sound, as per the title, bloody dangerous. Yeah, and he kept going over Berlin doing pathfinding and what have you. Oh, horrendous! It sounded really scary stuff. You know, he got his machine got shredded on one occasion. I haven't finished it yet. I'm about 2/3 of the way through the book, but I cannot recommend it highly enough. If you like a good read, get the book. If you prefer to listen on audio, just get the audio book or Audible or whatever. So it's Colin Bell, Bloody Dangerous. Very, very good read indeed. Anyway, on that note, is there anything else I wanted to cover? I know I talked about the photo etch glue. We're going to have a go with that in the very near future. As I say, I'm on to my exhausts next. So next thing I'm going to be doing this afternoon is doing some, probably not doing physical building as much as playing around with paint and trying to decide on colours really. Trying to get that right. And then we move on to, I mentioned we've got the tanks to do next. The fuel and oil, the coolant and oil tanks. Then we've got the nacelles. I've been very naughty, as you'll see here. Yet again, I've been painting on the sprue again. Look at that. Ooh, naughty. That's a bit of Alclad on there, which I'm enjoying using the Alclad. It's not a recent product, but works beautifully. And then we're on to the wings, and then we're really getting moving then. So my plans to have this finished for Christmas, I think we are actually ahead of schedule now for sure. I think the beauty of what's going on here, though, is all about the mojo. So I'm going to finish off with just a few words about that. Everybody, Chris Jones has said, doesn't he? Chris Usher, he says, he kept on saying, hey, come on, what's the latest with the Mosquito? And there was no latest for months and months and months. 2 years, yeah. I'm now 2 years and a month into this build, okay. But now I'm actually building it properly. The problem I had was I got bogged down with all that nonsense and aftermarket and rubbish. So to all of you that are watching this, I would say this. If you are just like I was, I mean, obviously I had lots of excuses with the YouTube channel, which takes up huge amounts of time, of course. But the biggest problem was mojo getting started on this, and it was just, I was a bit out of practice. I have a reasonably high skill level. I'm not claiming to be one of the best models by a million miles, because you can see some of those on YouTube and some of them are phenomenal. But I just couldn't get started, and I was like, when you look at the paint job you've got to do, some of you have got an inkling of how I go about it. Whilst I may cheat with things like primer, I'm not cutting corners on the work, and I'm trying to put as much detail into it as I can to make it pop, you know. So I'm trying to go the extra mile and do my best, literally. And when I had that in my head, that's the way I want to do it, you know. But then you look at the instructions and you see all this painting and painting and painting and painting, and you're thinking, well, this is going to be a mammoth project, you know. But it's not as mammoth, you know. You've just got to break it down. I guess the way I approach it is this. Everything like those engines, I've treated each engine like it's a kit in its own right, really. I'm not trying to rush through it and get to the next stage and no, I'm not doing that. I'm wanting to look at the end of every stage and think, you have nailed it. Now we do the next one. Nail what you've got in front of you. Try and do your very best. Yeah, that's all you can do. And it doesn't matter how good you are or how good you think you are. Or bad, in my case. Just max out what you've got, you know. I mean, I'm a bit disappointed I can't find this tubing. So I was going to add some tubing on this. But in the Mosquito, I'm not convinced it's going to be noticed because of those big exhausts it has and the way they're designed. And because it has this big flange around it, some of the tubing and stuff I was going to probably wouldn't be seen anyway. So I'm not sure it's a big problem. You've just got to not let those things bog you down, and don't get stuck like I did with this aftermarket thing. I mean, I look back now and I've still got a pile of this Edouard aftermarket here, almost the entire fret. And I'm thinking, well, and this is what was making it. Oh, I don't know whether I should do that. Should I use that piece or that piece or that piece or that piece? And it's just putting the anchor on the build, you know. I likened it previously when I was in this situation. I couldn't get going. I couldn't get beyond this seat belts and what sort of instruments to use and all those little frets and bits of this and bits of that. And I likened it to the Americans after D-Day in Normandy when they got bogged down in the bocage country. It was a bit like that. I just couldn't break out into doing what I do best. I was stuck. It was like I was a prisoner of these other things I felt I psychologically got no control of, which is not true, but it felt like there's nothing I can do. And I didn't want to make the wrong decisions and then look at it and think, you haven't done this as well as you could have done it. I mean, in the end, I used 90% of the Tamiya provided materials from the kit. Not the seatbelts, obviously, but a lot of it was Tamiya. And look at it now, and I'm very happy with it. I'm very satisfied I did the right thing, actually. That's maybe for other people. That's not the way you would go. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. Just do what you do best. Get to the point that you can start enjoying it. And this is what I did. So going back to the Americans in Normandy getting stuck in the bocage country and bogged down, and they needed to break out into the open country, tank country, you know, and get out of this rut they were in where they were trapped. And this is what I was like. And as soon as I got that cockpit together and finally got the pilot and the navigator done, got all that fine painting out of the way, got the belts sorted, got them in the cockpit, or got the pilot in, because the navigator's going to be with his hand on the ladder. The minute that was done, suddenly it's like the dam busters breaching the dam, you know, or Operation Cobra for the Americans, where they finally broke out of their bridgehead in Normandy. You know, you're breaking out into tank country, breaking out into the bits of the kit where you can get moving and get flowing. Now that doesn't mean rushing, not for me anyway. I mean, everybody do it. You know, should do it the way they want to do it. If you want to rush it, some people like. I mean, I was going to say Phil Flory, but he doesn't rush. But he has a much faster pace. My God, you know, he builds kits at a pace that's more than 10 times what I build at. But we build in different ways. It's not a comparison, really. It's just a different approach. And you've got to do what you do. Don't try and copy me or Phil Flory or anybody else. You've just got to find your own sweet spot that enables you to A, enjoy it, most important thing of all, and B, makes you want to come back and carry on doing it. And this is the biggest thing that I didn't have at the beginning. I just couldn't get started. I couldn't get motivated on these kit. I just couldn't get into it. You know, now I'm absolutely flying now. I mean, I'm sure people like Chris, who felt like my biggest critic, he isn't, I know. He's a big supporter of my channel. But he was like, I think he was trying to give me the boot up the backside. He said, well, you just get on with it. And I'm sure even he's surprised now. The pace at which I've actually now got moving at is as quick as I've ever done before. Well, not as quick as I've ever done before, because I say the first bit took over 2 years. But I said before, I built that Spitfire in 3 months, which is probably a record for me. And the Mustang was only 4 months. Was it 3 months as well? I think that was about the same. I think they were both about. I think the Mustang was three and a bit months, and the Spitfire was 3 months exactly. So, if I'm enjoying the kit, and this is the same for most of you, I'm sure. If you're enjoying it, you're going to want to carry on doing it. Now, it has been helped by having a very miserable, wet, dark winter, which has finally got me. You know, there's not much else to do, and it's like. We may have nice sunny days when I may have other things on my mind, going out or whatever, you know, watch a bit of motor racing or whatever it happens to be, a bit of cycling, whatever, driving my sports car, etc. But it's all about the mojo, isn't it, modelling? You can't do this model hobby without the mojo. You need to be fiercely motivated. And it's only when you can unlock that door of motivation in your head that you're really going to fly out into the distance and start to enjoy it and find it fun, which is what it's supposed to be for, you know. So to summarise, so far, so I say in my mind, I'm about halfway through. In truth, I'm absolutely loving this model. I mean, it's got to be one of Tamiya's greatest ever. I mean, I think the Tomcat might actually even eclipse it with some of the engineering hacks that they built into that, which are quite clever. But this is just pure, perfect engineering. The parts go together perfectly. It's still very fiddly though. There was parts of this, as mentioned, I mentioned about the little pipes in the engine and getting some of these subframes together and things. A little bit fiddly actually. Didn't quite. They don't fall together like some of the cockpit did. It's been a bit tricky in places. But then again, the tooling's a little bit older. But it could be worse. I could have been building a border model Lancaster bomber. In which case I'd have had 4 Merlins to build, some god-awful clear part glass, you know, jeez. And what were they charging for that? So was it £600 or something? Well, this track now. Not one that's on my radar. I think that would, all the downsides of the detail and the amount of painting and all these things I moaned about on that would be on a, well, basically double this, isn't it? Really, double, you know? So I don't think that's probably not for me. This is probably quite enough. But it's a big old project, you know. It's a big. I can tell by the way I'm going through the paint. You know, I'm going through the cockpit interior green. I think I'm on I'm about to start my 3rd bottle of it. I've been using it right, left, and centre. There's a lot of it in this model. And the semi-gloss black as well. That's gone down, and I've got quite low on my silver enamels as well. So I'm going through the paints, you know. But I'm glad I've adopted this new procedure of the disposable cups, because I think without them, trying to clean up paint palettes was awful. I was constantly got fumes of the cleaning material. It's a little bit more wasteful, I have to admit, but it's far better for your motivation to keep going. I'm doing far more building, and I'm having far more fun with this model than anything I've done for 5 years, 6 years, since the Spitfire basically. 6 years. A good 6 years, about nearly 6.5 years now in fact. So yeah, if you're thinking of buying this model, be careful, because It's now £200 plus in most places. I've seen it as high as £260. I think I saw one on eBay not long ago. I'm not sure I paid £260 for it, but it is a beautiful model, and you can build it straight out of the box. You don't need to go for all this aftermarket stuff. And building it out of the box is what's helping with the motivation and the mojo, really. Anyway, there you are, giving you a jolly good update, a bit of a chat, hopefully a bit of motivational speaking there, which will, those of you that, I know one or two of you that are regulars in the chat, on the live chat with me, are saying, oh well, really need to get on with this and I'm struggling with this. People often talk about it as a palette cleanser when you do a nice simple kit. In fact, Chris has just offered to loan me a kit which is a good palette cleanser, a Tamiya tank. I'll get into that another day. But something, you know, if you're bogged down or you're having trouble motivating yourself or you're just not in a good place, just take a step back and go for something simple and quick and fun. I mean, this is not simple or quick, but it is fun. It is ticking the last box a lot, and it's just, I'm going through it thinking it's as good as I'd hoped, you know. And when you've been through that experiences like the Kinetic Sea Harrier, you realise that this is on a different level altogether, really. So that's what you need, something like this. Maybe a smaller one, maybe less than £200, you know. But there's some nice kits out there. You can have an F-35 or, you know, a nice. You can have a Spitfire 109. There's lots of nice kits out there, and it doesn't have to be Tamiya. There's other products are available. That's it from me today. Thank you for watching. I hope you thought it was interesting and gives you a bit of an insight into what's going on and how it's going. Some interesting kits to review in the very near future. Got a very interesting racing car that was driven by Nigel Mansell, one of my great heroes, and the person has loaned me this kit. I'm not going to tell you who it is now, keep you suspense, but he actually met Mansell when he was driving for Williams, so he's actually got a photograph. I'm going to share that with you as well. So that's something that I shall enjoy talking about, so subject close to my heart. So watch out for that. Till next time, thank you very much for tuning in. Don't forget we're going to be going to memberships very, very soon, probably around Easter time, because I'm still working on that. I'm getting so carried away with all this building, everything else has gone on hold. I've got some DIY that needs doing around the house, and I've put everything on hold because I'm so frantically building Merlin engines, you know. Anyway, until next time, stay well, stay safe. Hope to see you again soon. Don't forget to give us a like, very important at the end. I often forget to say it. Give us a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the very near future. Until then, thanks a lot. Take care of yourselves, and bye for now.